Hey everyone, it's Will, Gamer Dad, with another video for you. So first off, I'd like to give a shout out to one of my Patreon supporters, Ben. Thanks for your support. Now in today's video, we're going to of course show you the farming results over the last 4 weeks. And as you already know, I always preach to use maximum red and green keys. And again, for those newer to the channel, I also recommend buying maximum red and green keys through the Emporium if you can afford the Siberia's gems, in order to get as many rewards as you can, which helps you either upgrade or side grade some of your 4.5s to those valuable 5-star as you need them for later on in the game. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. I also do have a Patreon account for those who want to support me this way. So I'll start off the video by kind of illustrating what I'm working on right now, and please let me know in the comments below what you guys are working on as well. I mean, obviously in between chapters of the future mythos, we don't really have too much to do. I mean, there is the occasional manifest weapon, but most of the time at this point, I know a lot of you can even beat it, probably not even with my help. You guys have more than powerful enough teams to handle those true manifest fights. Now, that being said, I am still grinding the Underworld. It's the easiest one for me to grind, and not only that, I'd like to stock up on more of those valuable bullseye ore that you need for those crazy endgame kind of strats, as well as some of those combo rate ore that only drop in this area. Of course, even when running Underworld, you do have a high chance of getting chant scripts if you do either run, obviously, the normal worlds, or if you buy those mural fragments, which then you can fight on that Phantom Eden, which that area apparently gives you a slightly higher chance of getting chant scripts. But that being said, the end chest by each boss does have a chance, which you can clearly see here. As for my red keys, I had actually started off last month by still continuing on to farm the Enema Tome for Daisy's VC Grasta, but since I was fortunate enough to finally get Eva, and I'm sure many of you did follow that, and I thank you all again for your support and kind words. It was a battle, but I finally got her. I have now moved on to Rift Breaker very hard. Her tome drops there, and so I'm going to be working on her VC Grasta there. Now, again, for those relatively new to the channel, and even for people at endgame, you're probably wondering, Will, what's the point of the VC Grasta, or even the true VC Grasta? After all, it only gives, what, +5/+5 stats, and I mean, you need like 30 tomes or even 15 treatises or codexes in order to kind of get the true VC Grasta. I will say that when you equip the VC Grasta over normal, of course, first of all, you do get the benefits of a VC coming in for 2 turns instead of 1, and the best examples of using those is for things like with Yifa or Myunfa, so where they increase crit damage up by 50% for 2 turns now instead of 1. There's other defensive ones that obviously put up shields or debuffs on the enemy, but in terms of offensive, having that 2 turns set up when coming in with a VC, it really allows for a more flexible and diverse amount of strategies. And so for any units that you find the VC is extremely powerful, definitely at least get the basic VC Grasta to enable it to last for 2 turns. Not only that, but the stats when you get a true VC can be 15/15, and some of those are very, very useful stats such as power, speed, int, so on and so forth. And overall, that just increases your damage potential on your team and maybe push you over the edge for some of those tougher fights that come later on in the game. Now, one other thing I'd like to touch on as this month's topic, and of course I just kind of ramble on, you know how Gamer Dad just kind of lectures, and I do apologize for that. I'm kind of thinking more of the defensive power creep of the game. Now you may be asking, what the heck is that, Will? Now, if you've noticed, obviously as we get more and more powerful units such as Eva, Alter Dewey, blah 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 blah, you've noticed that the moves, the damage that you can make on those attacks, and obviously with the zones, another zone, and other crazy mechanics, each subsequent unit's damage is higher and higher, and your team's damage skyrockets into the billions. Like, remember, when we first started, no zone, no Grasta, no nothing, you're lucky to do 1 or 5 million during an AF. As you get through the game and you finally unlock all those Grasta systems, zone systems, and you get more powerful teams, you know, billions isn't even another question. Like, you've noticed even some of the most recent challenges 4.5 billion damage against those 4 true elemental great spirits, right? So, I mean, the game expects you to be able to do 4.5 billion, if not more. I'm sure many of you who are at the end game can do that, and even if you're in the beginning and mid game, you know that that's only an eventuality, as you probably have drafted more powerful units. Like, if you think of, if you've joined in the last, say, year, all your banners are probably things like the altars, Melissa, Eva, Pizzica, and so on and so forth. And so you have a very powerful team right off the bat, less struggles than obviously some of us veterans when we had very few units, and most of them were quite weak at that time. So anyways, enough about the damage. What I'm talking about more is the defensive power creep in the game. So notice that a lot of the units nowadays, the debuffs are not 25-25, which was amazing back then, right? Remember using manifested Renri. That Judgment dual debuff 25-25 was what I used to carry myself through fights like the twins, like really top tier fights. They were essentially the most useful and powerful dual debuffs out there. But if you look in the last 6 months, look at Ace Sabami, for example. Very clear example. 35-35 dual debuff. You are seeing things like end of turn barriers up to 30%, even on offensive support units like Alter Dewey. AS Myunfa has a barrier end of turn up to 30% depending on number of moves. You have upcoming units having barriers. You have even the Kids of the World. She's a free unit, and you can get upwards of 50% dual debuff when you set her up high enough. And not only that, you start seeing shields, pretty standard shields before. I would say a 30% type shield was considered decent, and obviously the rare unit would have a 50% type shield, such as the Aurora Force or Elemental Barrier from Radius, for example. Nowadays, do you not notice people are getting 50% type shields, 50% like physical shielding? There's like shields everywhere, and some of them have dual shields. Look at Nikoko, for example, Alter Dewey, and even some of the newer forms of the Iskas out there. Now, you may be asking, what does it have to do with me? I mean, right now I can probably 1-turn kill, 2-turn kills. The current meta is still obviously the Melissa-led team, or even AS Hardy team, and with the new Alter units and Zone Grasster, you probably can punch through anything at this point. Yes, that is true. However, given the fact that the devs are giving us those kind of defensive capabilities, as in dual debuff 35-35 or even 30-30 is very common, and all those shielding, you know what that means, right? That means that you'll be expected to be able to defend against super powerful attacks moving forward. And so, in terms of planning for the future meta, and of course, you know, when I do should you summons, or my friend and I kind of talk about banners and things before I kind of do my ideas and share with you, you might want to consider the defensive nature of a unit as part of the package when drafting or deciding to summon on a unit. And to be fair, I do cover those defensive capabilities when I am recommending or not recommending a certain unit. For example, some of the most recent banners, Nikoko, I highly recommend it, and I went for her. Both as an offensive support and a defensive support. She has a shield, she's got the crit damage up, and so on and so forth. Pizzica, again, is another super powerful unit. She's got Oratorio, which can shield and obviously heal statuses and so on and so forth. Barrier and so on and so forth. And of course, she can do the crazy Rhapsody Aria, which is a super offensive. And so if you're looking for especially those kind of support units, would tend to last longer in your roster than pure DPS units, which have basically one goal and one goal only, which is to do tons and tons of damage. As the damage goes up, those units aren't going to be nearly as valuable. And the reason why is, let's be honest, even a free team can probably clear most content, if not all content in the game. So your DPS is not going to be the problem. It's the shielding that may be eventually the problem. And I'm sure that even some of you who are newer to the game, you can Melissa everything up to a certain point, and then you're like, darn it, just got stomped. Like, for example, a very clear boss that kind of checks your kind of knowledge of shielding would be something like the Teo Minas, which is the end boss in the I guess the mythos with AS Clark, right? I know a lot of people were saying that boss was impossible, difficult, and that's the normal version, not even including the optional shadow version. And I would say that with a good understanding of some of the debuffs required, the type of attacks the enemy is doing, and kind of either mitigating it or kind of moving around it, even a free team such as the Tales of team can kind of support you and beat that boss, whereas a more powerful team, you may have the DPS, but being that it gets absorbed or resisted, you won't be able to counter the bosses or enemies' moves. And so, moving forward, regardless of what stage of game you are, I would highly recommend you to consider the defensive nature of fights as well as the offensive nature. Obviously, if you can clear a fight with a Melissa-led or AS Hardy-led 2-3 turn kill using things like Eva, hey, great. And there's plenty of examples of that. However, if you find that you don't have as much power, because let's be honest, not everyone has every unit in the game, the most powerful meta teams that do turn 1 and turn 2, you have to find other ways to survive. And so in many of my clears, I do try to not use Melissa or Pichika for those reasons. Not because I don't know how to use them. It's just that I figure everyone's going to be showing different strats anyways. The purpose of the channel here is kind of just to kind of show alternate ways of kind of doing things and hopefully spark some ideas on your half, in order to kind of like, oh, hey, I never thought about using that unit before, or, oh, that's what that move does, and so on and so forth. A good example is when I used, for example, Bivet against the AS Iska Manifest fight. People are like, who the heck is Bivet, and what does she do? And, after learning that she is quite capable in a fire or magic zone setting against physical type fights such as AS Iska, that does lend you to kind of be more creative with your team comps. Another good example would be True Manifest fight Suzette using normal style Hardy. And the reason why is because his spam move actually does give wind resistance up quite a bit. And in combination with Fire Zone and some other dual debuffs, you could see that in that video, I actually took 0 damage with that team. And that's just some of the fun things we can do in game. Because, blowing people out of the water is also very fun. And I won't discourage anyone from putting a bunch of 9s on the board. But I kind of think messing around with the fight mechanics and just kind of surviving and just laughing at the enemy's defense and fight damage on me is also very fun as well. And so I've always been, I guess, more of a defensive player. Even when I was younger and playing RPG games, I tended to draft mages on my team. I'm sure people who are fans of the original Final Fantasy 1, you can make a party of 4. I don't even think I had a frontline fighter. Usually I had a red mage, black mage, white mage, or even 2 white mages or 2 red mages kind of thing, because the red one can do some offensive and some defensive, and I just kind of let out that way, and I just enjoyed the fight that way. And so even when I played this game, of course, having the a very good roster where I can bring full offense teams, you've seen those in action. However, having some defense is also fun. Now, one last thing I'll talk about just quickly in terms of drafting or making multiple teams. I'm sure there are lots of ideas out there as what's the current meta, what's the best team out there, what's the best team I can make. If you're relatively short on stones, and most of us are, I would recommend just building the one team as complete as you can, as opposed to like myself, where I'm actually spreading myself out thin and trying to get kind of a diverse number of teams to demonstrate things to you. Since you don't have to demonstrate it to anyone, theoretically you can just try to make one super team and see how much and how far you can get, or even 2 teams that kind of overlap, and that will be more than enough to handle some of the content in the game. Now, in this part of the video, you can see that after tons and tons of farming, finally got 5 Maverick Treatises, didn't feel like buying one from the shop, and we are upgrading that. I will be doing a 5-star review of Hardy in the coming days if I do have time. AS Hardy is going to be a fun one. He looks to be ultimate. Anyways, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.